Good afternoon. Back again. Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks to Minister Healy-Rae there for his kind words of encouragement. Just a couple of thoughts on today, if you wouldn't mind. The Agri-Food Regulator's journey in promoting fairness and transparency began officially on the 13th of December 23. And since that day, a key focus of our work has been on the building of relationships that are underpinned by respect as we together forge trust or increase trust along the supply chain. As an independent body focusing on business-to-business relationships along the supply chain, our stakeholders are very diverse, as you can see around the room today, and that is certainly reflected here. And that is one of the reasons why it's such an important day in the journey for not only for the regulator but for everyone, I think, in terms of increased fairness and transparency, and certainly in the evolution of cultural change. So coming together to discuss issues which are vital to not only, as I said, people in the room but outside, is important in being able to understand the positions of others along the supply chain, to hear about the different challenges and opportunities. And that's one of the key roles of the regulator, as I see it, to open up and facilitate those opportunities for learning, understanding and discussion. And particularly important, I suppose, or even made even more important, because we do talk about a supply chain, but of course, as Minister Hayden mentioned earlier in his video, it's actually a dynamic ecosystem. So, and I don't need to tell you that. So it's very difficult to sum up today in a few short minutes, but I'll try. So first of all, I suppose, thanks to Mark White in terms of giving us an overview of the importance of the annual supplier survey in the UK, and definitely those insights have helped the Agri-Food Regulator immensely. Then we're provided by an overview of the survey findings by Bernie Coyne, and I suppose a hugely important factor in the conducting of that survey was, of course, the collaboration of most of the businesses, and that most of them are here as well. Buyers actively took time to ensure that their supplier voices were heard, and we really appreciate that, and we do obviously strive for even more cooperation next year. It goes without saying that the regulator is very appreciative of the time and effort and the time invested by suppliers in providing feedback. And obviously, as our chair said earlier, that will benefit all going forward. And rest assured that the regulator will work with buyers in terms of following up on those survey findings and addressing specific concerns that were raised. I think specifically in relation to unfair trading practices, the message is very clear from us in terms of, message to suppliers is very clear. Please reach out to discuss issues that you may be experiencing. The contact will be treated in the strictest confidence, and indeed the regulator has a legal duty to do so and to take steps to protect the identity of complainants. So that's really important. The survey was also used to ask suppliers about other issues that may be experiencing, and I spoke earlier about the development of buyer guidelines. So the discussions have been very insightful here, and will definitely help inform any buyer guidelines. And thanks obviously to Niamh Brennan and Conor Kilduff for their input here, because we have been listening intently. I suppose onto the policy direction, we were very honoured to have Patricia Riley dial in as well, and she spoke about the roadmap at EU level, which obviously is going to impact us here. She talked about vulnerability, and I suppose the vulnerability of some actors has been particularly acute in the last couple of years. There was a lot of discussion, very useful conversation about, below cost selling and contextualizing the price with the cost, and that was a very useful point that was made by our colleague Karen Shalley. I suppose the role, or the bringing in the consumer voice, or the consumer element of it, is extremely important as well. But I do think one of the important things that I take out of it is that this is more than about legislation and regulations and all of this sort of thing. One cannot legislate for will and active engagement, and that's why it's so important that you're all here today. So I suppose as a final thought, and I did mention this earlier, it's not lost on me the responsibility that's on the shoulders of those here who work in the agri-food supply chain at all phases. We know all too well that supply chains can be disrupted significantly, pandemics, geopolitical instabilities. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations. And I suppose the interactions have been insightful, and the networking opportunities plentiful as well. And as I said, understanding opportunities and challenges all along the supply chain is important for fostering the partnership approach. At this point, I'm going to finish, but I want to thank, in particular, all the speakers and panelists for today, and also Mr. Jonathan Healy for doing an absolutely excellent job. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the Agri-Food Regulators Board, and in particular Joe Healy, of course, our chair, for their support to date. And in addition to colleagues in the Department of Agriculture and our ministers, and just to I suppose very much say that I'm aware of how lucky I am to work with such driven colleagues at the regulator, both internally and externally, and people that provide services to us. And genuinely I am, because they're so driven and so professional, and I enjoy working with them every single day. So this industry is very lucky to have them. So thank you very much for your immense efforts in making today happen, and thank you to you all, and please network further while enjoying your lunch. Thank you.